if I didn't have one single slide about it. I am one of the founding partners of Frequency Foundry. We are a firm that's focused on two key verticals, the higher education sector being one of them. The other one is the public sector. Our work is largely been in the higher education sector, working with universities and colleges across Canada and the United States, helping them with their CRM needs through a solution that we've built that resides on top of the Higher Education Accelerator. But the focus of today's conversation is really going to be around the higher education industry, what's forcing the transformation, how the accelerator fits it, and where the accelerator is lacking as well. So that's really what I hope to cover over the next 30 or 40 minutes here. So without further ado, let's just jump right in. So when we think about uh, accelerating transformation within the higher education sector, it's critical for us to sort of understand where the higher education sector is sitting at. And this really will sort of drive what the necessity of CRM within the higher education industry is. The world as we know it is rapidly changing. There's technologies that are new that are now commercialized that traditionally had just been a concept not too long ago. When we think about learning as well, we know this higher education industry has transformed significantly since the pandemic hit. This transformation has been sort of catalyzed by the pandemic, but it was long overdue as well. And wow, what do we mean when learning has changed? We know that students today are operating both in a physical and a digital world, that there's a combination of a hybrid learning approach wherein sometimes they're in their classroom, sometimes they're sitting at Starbucks and attending their classroom, and all of this needs to be supported from a higher education standpoint. So while we may be, so the end is near when it comes to the pandemic. The post-pandemic world doesn't look too different for higher education sector. Students will be wanting to still have that option of sitting in a Starbucks and potentially attending their class. And that's really where the student of the future is driving this transformation within higher education sector. AI is coming into play wherein they are able to determine that they're able to have their own personal Cortana guiding them through the process of their education, their degree. We're also starting to see that the kind of jobs that are being created are really jobs that have been that were not there 3 to 4 years ago, and that's what this particular generation of higher education has to be prepared for. And that's really what the market is asking. From the perspective of the market asking, the higher education universities and colleges are forced, therefore, to make this transformation happen. And that's sort of just to set the context here in terms of where we sit. When we think about the pandemic, and what the impact on higher education or has been. There's a lot we know. There's some we don't know. As an example, there's about $19 billion in revenue losses for post-secondary, and that's really what the pandemic has done to higher education. So it's more important than ever before to be able to reinvent themselves, reinvent how they're delivering the services, what sort of experience they're offering their students, and so on as well. So what are they really looking for from a technology perspective? They're looking for the ability to automate student interactions to potentially improve the experience of the students. And this doesn't happen at one point, it happens across the entire life cycle of that particular student. That's really where Microsoft has come in and supported that approach with this aspect of the education transformation framework. And the education transformation framework really is focused on these four pillars: the pillar of student success, pillar of teaching and learning, academic research, and secure and connected campus. Through this sort of a framework, Microsoft believes that by adopting the framework, by focusing on the key areas within the pillars, that higher education institutions are able to better transform themselves to be able to meet the needs of the student of not just today, but potentially tomorrow as well. And the goal here is that once this is in place, that you gain a strategic and a holistic view of your institution, you're able to create a vision, a plan, and have the appropriate technology supporting it. And you're able to build yourself a roadmap for digital transformation in the future. So the roadmap is ongoing as we look at it. And when we think about where the Power Platform fits in, where a lot of the technology pieces of what we're talking about fits into the overall higher education solution architecture, we see that at the core of what is within most educational institutions is your Office 365 infrastructure, offering that productivity, collaboration. Then we also know that from the perspective of data analysis and visualization, Power BI is playing a major role there. Power Automate is looking at automating a lot of the the mundane tasks, the things that could be low in value but high in effort, and that's really where Power Automate is coming in as well. From the perspective of Azure and what's available within Azure, when you think about the data lake, when you think about the data factory, these are all becoming core parts of that infrastructure as well. And I mean, this particular slide speak to that same sort of technology stack in slightly greater detail. As you can see on the left-hand side here, from a productivity perspective, we have Office 365 Teams. Right in the very middle, from a visualization perspective and a system intelligence, we have the Power BI, the Azure Machine Learning Studio as well. On the right-hand side is the Dataverse and the Dynamics 365. The Microsoft Power Platform is coming into play, all residing whether it's residing within the Dataverse or whether it's residing within a Azure SQL database somewhere. And that's really the overall structure for how the Power Platform is fitting into the higher education sector. When we think about what the goal here is, and our focus for today and what we have done is around the student success pillar. The student success pillar really looks at these four key areas: recruitment, retention, completion, and engagement. And when you think about recruitment, it's really about ensuring that the school is able to recruit the students, but not just any students, the right kind of students, and that they do that through the personalized outreach and engagement. This is done based on data that's available within within the Dataverse. Then the retention, we know that the attrition rates in higher education are significant. What this really means is that from the perspective of looking at a student, the first to second year, there's about 40% dropout between the first and second year students in higher education. The average completion rate over a 6-year term for a 4-year program remains at less than 40%. So that gives you an idea of how many people actually complete a higher education program. When we think about completion, and that's really what we were talking about here, you want to be able to ensure that you have providing the right services at the right time, providing the right support so that the student can graduate. But not just that, once they graduate, you want to ensure that they're coming back and contributing to the school. That's really the way that the accelerator or the education transformation frameworks for student success is structured, and thereby the accelerator is structured as well. One of the challenges that higher education institutions have, they're data rich and insights poor. The simple reason why they're data rich and insights poor, will go into greater detail. And that's largely because of the fact that there's silo. The silos exist in terms of the departments. Silos exist in terms of the enterprise systems that are currently in use. And connecting these silos is often ineffective, time-consuming, and it's expensive to maintain. So that's really what's happening, or what has been the legacy nature of systems containing student data within higher education. An interesting one was where in 2015, ACRO, which is the American Association of College Registrars, conducted this survey for all of their, members, and there was about 1,500 schools that responded. And this survey on the right-hand side sort of shows you a distribution of where they house student data, or what they consider as CRMs within a school. And you see that recruiting and admissions was largely where it was used. We see a significant portion around the alumni fundraising aspect, but there's advising components, there's student life components, there's housing, there's student support services. And why this slide is important is because the Education Accelerator really focused on ensuring that each one of these areas were addressed. The nature of why it's disconnected is because this is what we see as the structure of systems within higher education. We see that over the course of life cycle, there are potentially there's a CRM or a database of some sort that's containing data about prospective students. There's a disconnected system that's containing data about alumni. Or you may have vendors that are offering these modular products that are each in essence its own database, or you have a bunch of shadow systems that exist across the environment. And that's really sort of resulted in this fragmented approach to how that data is available and managed. And that's really what the Dataverse is looking to change, because trying to make sense out of that data, unless you're a physicist or a mathematician, I can tell you I don't know what's going on this green board. That's sort of how higher education feels in terms of being able to make meaningful analysis from that fragmented data set as well. That's really what that really became the business case for having a common data platform that supported all of the departmental needs. So common data platform, yes, but it was also equally important that the feature and functionality required by each department was also supported over the course of having this common data platform. And that's really what we tried to do with, sorry, that's what we tried to do with our CRM solution. We took at its very core the Dynamics 365 and the Dataverse. We've added the we added the computing power of Azure, brought in AI and machine learning from Azure. We layered on top the Higher Education Accelerator, which we will be talking about, but then added functionality and features required by individual lines of businesses within that higher education. And that's really the overall architecture of our CRM system, Gray Matter. So again, common data platform supporting the full needs. And again, I don't want to make this a sales pitch by any means. So I'll be really talking about why it's critical to have that common data platform, but also have functionality across all of the departments within a higher education institution. The difference, though, is, and I guess I sort of spoke about we need to have it, and this will sort of tell you why you need to have it. So traditionally, this is how higher education would be reporting their success rate. They look at how many people completed. This is this is a Power BI chart that tells you this is how many people completed, this is how many people persisted, and so on. But the difference is when you think about a fragmented data set that just gives you these quantitative numbers versus being able to have that 360 view across that enterprise will give you something more like this. What is the personalized data about a single student that sort of tells you what's their likelihood to admit, what's their likelihood to enroll, what's their likelihood to retain, being able to provide the appropriate nudges in time because you've broken them down individually by their own personality. And yes, we can have a big debate here about the bias and so on. But at the end of the day, this is what this is bringing to you, the power that AI can give you, and the fact that the personalized learning approach really works towards ensuring that this student is given all of the tools required for them to complete and graduate. And that's really what what brought up the need for the Higher Education Accelerator, and then also ISV solutions on top of the Higher Education Accelerator. Here's a couple more examples. Again, this is looking at a particular student, and we've really created what their academic history has been, what their desired job is, and what they will need to do to be able to achieve that job. So what sort of courses, where they have to improve, and so on. Recommendations are made and presented back to the school as well. And this gives you an example of how the data within the Dataverse has been used to provide nudges at point-in-time nudges that are personalized to the individual student. So having said that, I'll jump over to the Microsoft Education Accelerator. So the Education Accelerator was first launched approximately in about 2018, I want to say, in its very elementary, rudimentary state. And today we're at version 3.2.3. And it's come a long way. It's achieved a lot of things, and it's great to see it grow, but there are still some limitations, and that's what we'll talk about today as well. So when we think about what the common primary entities they are within the Education Accelerator, we have these set of entities here from academic period to area of study, course history, education level, and so on. This is what this layer sits on top of your common your common data model. And there's multiple layers to how the Education Accelerator is even structured. As we go in there, we then start to see there's additional entities here as well, from program all the way down to test type. Now, if you think about it, we're talking about 25, 30 different entities that are over here. Now 25, 30 different entities to store all of that data to get to that personalization, as you can imagine, is not quite enough. And we can look at that when we look at each entity in greater detail, but I don't want to go into a significant amount of detail about the Higher Education Accelerator entity in the context of this discussion, because I wanted to keep it as functional as possible. We're also seeing that not only do we have entities that are specific to the Education Accelerator, they've also enriched entities such as your contact entity, your appointment, and so on have been all enriched as well. We also see that there are some primary connection roles that were created. So as an example, they're able to connect one contact with another contact as your advisor, a contact with a account as an alumni of that school, and so on. Those are really vertical specific connection roles that were introduced by Microsoft in the Education Accelerator. As we start to think about it a little more, we see these additional roles as well. And again, it's the way that the Microsoft team has been going about the Education Accelerator is through a process of survey, through a process of working with partners like us and Frequency Foundry and other companies as well, to understand what is the market requiring, what's available in it. So as you think about the connection roles, we can expect that these roles to change. We can expect them to grow as we look at future versions of the Higher Education Accelerator. There's also some primary entities within the Higher Education Accelerator, and you can see that the Education Accelerator, there are really two components, the Education Accelerator and the Higher Education Accelerator. Now, in order to use the Higher Education Accelerator, you must use the Education Accelerator common entities as well, and then also add on some specific entities within the higher education, such as grants, such as internships, and so on. But when you think about grants and when you think about internships, and I'll explain some of the limitations here as we move forward, but they also have a model-driven app which sits right on top, called the Higher Education app, that can be used for the purpose of using the accelerator, or you can really use components from the accelerator and build your own Canvas or model-driven app. Also, a key component of this is that portal, the portal for students, a portal for prospective students. And in the case of the accelerator, it includes a portal that is designed at existing students. So existing students would be, as an example, looking at their course history, looking at applying for grants, looking at internship opportunities and applying for those internship opportunities as well. They can also look at their scholarship. They can look at their own student resources. So every student can have associated student resources. And then then the task entity, which really gives you access to appointments and so on. Now, what are some of the limitations? Then there's a narrow focus in some entities. When you think about, as an example, the internship entity, our view, and based on looking at the education market, has been the internship entity has all the components that are required for higher education to sort of go, I can use this to be my jobs table. So rather than look at internship as a specific narrow focus, we would want Microsoft to be looking at this at a broader focus and say internship applies to jobs. So rather than term it internship, because it could be an internship, it could be a full-time engagement, it could be after graduation. The components all remain the same. There's a job, there's a student, bringing the two together through an application process, and then the selection of the winning candidate. So that could be, so rather than look at it as a narrow focus, if that scope could be expanded and look at it just as jobs as an example. The same thing applies from the perspective of a scholarship. So when you think about a scholarship is a funding opportunity. There is money available, there is a student requiring that money, there's an application process, and then a subsequent win. So when this applies, whether that scholarship, this applies in terms of financial aid, this applies in terms of any grant. So again, the focus in this particular example also has been significantly narrow. An additional component is when you think about the task and the fact that appointments are managed as activities, we find that to be significantly limiting simply because we know there's the resource scheduling capabilities that exist within the customer service module that could be leveraged for it, within the field service module that could be leveraged for it, that can actually present you far greater possibilities in terms of managing your appointments so that you can optimize the use of your resources, give the student the option to pick when they want their appointments and complete that whole booking process through an automated approach, as opposed to here, wherein this is really being looked at as a slightly glorified Outlook calendar. Another limitation is that the workflows in some cases, so there are these fields that are supposed to be calculated fields, but or that are supposed to be either calculated within the field or they could be managed through a workflow, but the workflow doesn't exist. The UI is limited and the dashboards are limited, but again, this is not nearly a complaint as much as it is what we have noticed, and that's completely understandable because Microsoft really wants partners to grow this, working directly with the client. The solution overall continues to grow, but as it stands today, is not a plug-and-play solution that you can just go, I'm going to deploy it within college X or university Y and start to use it as a plug-and-play solution. And that's really where we have gone ahead and created the required enrichment on top of that specific solution. So when you think about the Higher Education Accelerator and the way it's structured, you have your Microsoft Dataverse. There's the Education Accelerator that sits on top of it. The connection roles are layered as the next one above. We then have the solution for the higher education sitting over here. There's a portal solution that sits on top of the portal. And then there's a canvas or model apps that exist. But because we saw the limitations and because it does not fulfill the need, there have been additional components that we have added in here. So we do leverage the XRM and the ADX Studio components of the sample portals, whether that's the event management, the retail commerce portals. We've augmented it with capabilities from Click Dimensions from a marketing automation perspective, but obviously you can also use the Dynamics 365 marketing option as well. We have built a specific Canvas app that is applicable to us. And also the portal contains capabilities for not just your current student, but for prospective students, for alumni, for potentially high school counselors. All that functionality has been introduced within as a layer on top of the Higher Education Accelerator. So again, just a visual representation here. This is sort of and all of this is available to you right within the Education Accelerator blog, within their site on the Microsoft Docs, or also on GitHub. But you can look at this and you can sort of go, this is the added lake components. The red really represents, and again, this is just a very high level sample, but this is how we've enriched certain entities or added on new entities as required for the Higher Education Accelerator. So that was really an introduction to the Higher Education Accelerator and what it's capable of, what some of the limitations of the accelerator are. And I'll now sort of open it up to see if there's any questions. Raz, over to you, I guess.
Thank you, Shikar. Yes, there is a question. Sumit Kumar has asked the question, how was your experience of working with Microsoft Accelerator as they have now been deprecated and using the new industry cloud?
So the Microsoft Accelerator is, so when we talk about the accelerator and the industry cloud, that is a bit that So I don't know if there's an actual difference between the accelerator that we're using here and the industry cloud. The industry cloud is designed to have vertical specific line of business applications, and that's what we are talking about here. I think, Sumit, what you may be referring to, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you may be referring to the accelerator that was deprecated a few years ago. Is that sort of what you're addressing here?
Hiya. I've got a feeling. Yes. Yes. Sumit says yes.
Okay, so yes, the accelerator program was abandoned a few years ago, and when we come back with the industry cloud, it has been active since 2018. And this is Microsoft that has been continuing to evolve this solution. So it's not, when I talk about the accelerator, I'm not referring to the accelerators that existed, or mid 2015 and before when it was abandoned. Yes, you can absolutely keep. I see the other question. Can you keep a record of changes to connection roles, such as a contact going from a student to a teacher? Absolutely. That's the whole point of that 360. Is that there is that. So when you think about what we have done here is keep a separate table called the contact conversion table. The contact conversion table tells you at every state change, and when you think about the contact, there's a type. So that active contact type, as an example, it is a student. The next contact type is a teacher. When they go from one state to another, as that transition happens, every single primary data set associated with that contact is kept intact. And then we also keep an audit history of that particular individual. So all of that data is indeed kept as part of as part of the contact profile.
Okay. Great. Any other questions? Do you have any more presentation now? Hello there, Shakar.
I'm sorry about that, Raz. I did not hear that. Can you say that again?
I said, do you have any further presentation?
No, Mike, I decided to keep it. I mean, I did go through 54 slides, so I must have gone really fast. Um, but no, there's no more. This is all I had from my end. I'm happy to address any questions. You can look me up on LinkedIn, and if there's any questions specific to the higher education sector or even the government cloud, happy to address them.
Okay, well, thank you. So any other questions before we move over to the last session of the day, which is all about field services and sales? So Sumit Kumar has shared the industry accelerator solution that's available on GitHub. So essentially, that is the data model for Dataverse for the education solution, which the accelerator is built on. Would you agree, Shakar?
I would definitely agree. Let me, the version 3.2.3 is really what you want to be looking at.
Awesome. Okay, so be careful on the versions that you're using. But yeah, I believe Sumit's got the latest version there, so you can install that in your Dataverse environment to get an idea of the data model. But please bear in mind, and Shakar, please share your insight into that particular accelerator solution. But I guess it's a very much a bare bones solution with just a data model. You're not going to get the additional features that you've been talking about today. Would you agree?
I would absolutely agree. But it has its own limitations, even in terms of the data structure, but it's not a plug-and-play solution that a school could just go ahead, deploy on their Dynamics instance and expect to have a full-fledged hired CRM. It does accelerate. I think it's related to a question that's asked. It definitely does accelerate your time to development, time to go to market time as well. Because when you think about it, if you had to build a data model from scratch, you're looking at a significantly longer time versus leveraging what's here and using it to accelerate how fast you want to, to have your CRM in place. So you're looking at potentially an average go-to-market time of anywhere from 3 months to 6 months before a school can have a complete comprehensive working CRM solution.
Okay, any more questions? So Johan has shared the app source solution, which is great. And one final question for myself, Shakar. So one of the common themes we've noticed is there tends to be a bit of a challenging entry point to the industry cloud solution, particularly for customers as well as Microsoft partners when it comes to trying to get access to the industry cloud. And we've seen that's been an issue for both the non-profit, for the financial accelerator. Would you usually like to share your experiences of the for the education accelerator?
Absolutely. I mean, I can tell you that from my perspective, we use not just the education accelerator, but within that solution, within our solution, we use the nonprofit, the education, and the higher education accelerators. A big challenge as it relates to the higher education sector in its current state is that there are first of all, you do not know where what the roadmap is, and that's been a big challenge. So, but where we have started to see a change with Microsoft is they look at partners that have a footprint in the marketplace, such as ourselves. They are now consulting with us in terms of what we are seeing. They're sending out the preview to us to be able to sort of say, does this make sense to you? And are there things that you would like to see as it rolls out? So we are seeing that change. It was a lot harder 3 years ago because all we would know is boom, here's the industry accelerator version 1 or version 2, and we don't know why something has been done the way it has been done. And we also know that this is an average of all of their surveys across what Microsoft does with their clients. So it's not really representative of a detailed need from a particular school or a set of schools even. So that's really been the challenge when we initially saw, but it's definitely changing as Microsoft is making a lot of steps, or taking a lot of steps to be consulting with their partners prior to potentially building out new versions. There's also a dedicated team now, and that's a big change. Whereas when the first version was launched, it was the accelerator group was a common group, and that was where we saw a big difference.
Well, thank you, Shakar, joining us. Miami through to all representing Canada, but dialing in from Miami today. So once again, thank you, Shakar, for sharing that insight with us today. Do you have any final announcements or comments before we move over to the last session of the day?
That's all from me. Look forward to connecting with several of you, and hope you all enjoy the Dataverse Summit.
Thank you so much, Shakar. So it's a great opportunity to meet a new speaker in the community, Shakar. Thank you for sharing the insight into the Education Accelerator. So without further ado, we are over to our last session,